Welcome back. This is episode 4 of our youth series. You will remember we unpacked healthy eating on a tight budget. We delved deeper into mental health issues affecting our youth. Today we are discussing another very important topic, which is the finances. And together with me here today, I'm joined by Jennifer van Oerle, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Discovery Invest. She is an expert in this field, so I'm really looking forward to learning more about, budgeting as a young person. And in fact, budgeting as a parent too. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and really glad and excited to talk to you. I think I'm going to learn a lot for myself, not only for the young people that we are trying to educate here, but I think for me as a parent as well. So what are the common mistakes in terms of just thinking about money and budgeting for the young people?
So it's interesting. I've got 2 university-going children, so it's very interesting watching it play out and also reflecting on what I maybe did wrong when, in my younger life. So I think one of the hardest things is them spending their money before the month finishes. And I think seeing how it plays out for them and the people that they are around is running through the money and then coming to mom and dad if you have it. Yes. And then whether that money gets paid over or not. So I think my children will probably say they're hard done by because the pressures are not to come to the bank of mom and dad. In fact, my son often says the challenge every week is to make sure that he doesn't have to come. That's his challenge and his expertise. So I think that's definitely one of the problems that they have to deal with when they suddenly got to manage money on their own. I think also the other thing is not putting money aside, so living day to day, but not putting your money aside for the extra expenses, and that creates that good savings habit. If you can put it aside right from the very start, then you just come to expect that that's the way it works. And then I think also not talking up about the problems and the challenges that you're having. Money and financial matters is, in our generation and before, it's quite a taboo subject, and it seems to be continuing into the youngsters of today. So if they're not speaking up and they're not learning, and then not learning by making mistakes when the consequences are not catastrophic, then you've lost an opportunity to teach them something, and then they take those bad habits into adulthood, which we see often play out.
What's quite interesting though, Jennifer, is that when you think about, university students, they come from different backgrounds, different financial circumstances. Some are staying in, university residences where, they get meals covered as part of that. And then, the allowance they need is really maybe for just the top-up stuff that they can buy on their own. And then there are some kids who are in full-time private residences where everything, they do has to be paid for from the allowance. The pressure then for the various kids to say, but I see my friend can afford to eat out every day, and they can afford to buy themselves nice things every day or every week, and I can't do that. I think we have to speak about money and the fact that, not everyone is going to be able to provide their child with a very, substantial allowance. And I think it's important because financial issues, especially in that age group, could also affect their academic performance and also their mental well-being.
It's interesting because I talk to my kids a lot about this, and you're absolutely right. Every child is on a different in a different situation, and it really is about specific to that family and those children. And this whole trouble with trying to keep up with the Joneses. I think what we've done is just have as many open conversations with the kids of what we can afford to do for them, what we can't, and to be understanding of kids that maybe have more than what they have, and what are the challenges they bring, and those that have less than. And it's so interesting to see some of the kids respond so well to that, because they appreciate that some kids have got more pressure on them financially than some others. But then we've got the other end of the spectrum where the kids just have access to endless amounts of money. That brings its own set of problems. But I mean, you were talking about mental, the impact it has on the mental aspects of the children. So, and I think it's no different to being an adult. These pressures are real. You know, you've got to be seen to keep up with everyone around you. You don't want to be the one that says, oh no, I actually don't have money this week, I can't do that. It's hard. It's difficult to do that. It affects your confidence. It could affect your studies. You know, you could have kids that hide in their rooms because they just don't want to admit that they're financially constrained. So that's where I think talking about it and talking in the family about what you can and can't do, but also encouraging them to talk to their friends and be open with us, because I think the more they do it at this age, they'll be more predisposed to do it in adulthood. And we can see that adults are battling with this because they haven't learned to deal with this. And it shouldn't be a taboo subject, but it is. Unfortunately, it is.
No, but you're so right. I think everything that we don't speak about, everything that we brush under the carpet usually then has got that. There's usually some stigma that then comes with not having money. When in actual fact, there's nothing wrong with not having money. If you don't have money, you don't have money. And, you know, you have to say, okay, with the little that I have, how do I make it, you know, last that long? You know, earlier on you spoke about, they get this allowance and they blow it in the first week. I mean, it was interesting to hear some stories from friends of mine. And also when I shared with my daughter, and my daughter actually said, I also think you should maybe give it to me in bits and pieces rather than to give it, to give me my full monthly allowance. So how do we, what advice can you give them? So now they've got their full allowance. I mean, there are some who will say, give it to me every week. It's like a weekly allowance to actually, but we do want them to be able to
live as an
know
adult.
how to manage their full monthly allowance, because, you know, I think in employment these days, you don't get weekly, salaries. So you get your full monthly salary that you have to make sure that you create that nice budget that allows you to have this allowance take you through the month.
So I think you've got two powerful tools at your fingertips, an Excel spreadsheet and a bank account that's got a savings account attached to it. So the one way is to, when you're doing your budget, understand what your monthly expenses are, so that you know that come what may, you have to pay those. And that's not just for students. I mean, this is just for everyday people. And then what I see my daughter does really well is she works out what she needs to do. If she's coming home for the weekend, she knows she has to, pay for transport to get home and get back, because she has to cover out of. So she moves that into her savings account. Then she's not tempted to spend it, and she almost hides the money from herself. And that seems to work really well. And I suppose that's the concept we have as adults as well. We sort of put the money aside that we have to pay before the end of the month. And then the balance that's left, that's the money we can live on. And that seems to work really well.
That's awesome. I mean, most of the young people don't think there's enough to save.
There's never enough.
It's like there isn't
Not
much.
just young people,
everyone. This habit of saving really should be nurtured from an early age, so that by the time you are an adult and you're working, it's something that is now second nature. You are able to just put aside. It doesn't matter how small or how big your salary is. At least you have got that already instilled in you. But now, as a parent, how do you know that you're giving enough?
According to the kids, never enough.
But for you, just to know, because they will always want more. But just because I must tell you, I didn't know how much to give. I just thought, okay, let me calculate maybe what they will need. But you find that there's always a requirement for a top up every once in a while. And then you ask yourself, am I giving too little? Am I giving too much? So how do we know that we're giving enough?
I haven't worked that one out myself either, because if you ask my kids, they'll say they never get enough. When I see the money go out of my bank account to play, it's too much. So I think you sort of gauge it on how they live. We have conversations with them. We did sit down with them and say, are we being too constraining on you? Because at the end of the day, we want them to learn the lessons of balance. But you also don't want to constrain them so
Yeah.
much that they just feel that they can't come out on the money that they have. So I think we continuously relook at the budget and just assess, is it reasonable? There's a little bit of give in there for unexpected expenses, a little bit of fun if they want. But if they want the big things, they need to save, and the big things come out of the savings. Alternatively, they need to get a side hustle or a job. So there's enough space within their budget that if they want to do the big things, that they need to put money, either earn money or put money aside, and that seems to work. The other thing that we do with the kids, which I heard was not all the children do, is they get an annual increase to their allowance, which is the same percentage of what we get in our salary.
Yes.
So that they start to learn that they get the inflationary increase.
Yes.
Because that's life. That's what you get if you're lucky enough to work for a company that does give you an increase. If you don't get an increase, and you've just got to live on what you get.
Yeah. I mean, another important one, I mean, we did touch on needs and wants. And I think you've touched on the big things coming out of savings. But how do we equip our kids to know right up front? Because sometimes I don't think it comes naturally to them that this is actually a want. How can we equip them to be able to say, what is the difference between a need and a want, and how do you prioritize between the two?
So what we did is we worked with the budget, and we actually put a little asterisk next to the needs versus the wants. So they know, or hopefully they know, that having food in the hostel, because they're in the hostel where they have to cook for themselves. So they have to do the grocery shopping, and they have to cook and provision for themselves. So if they don't do that, they go hungry. If they've got transport, the one has to pay petrol, the other one has to use Ubers or Lyfts or things like that. They've got to prioritize that, and then any money that's left over. But both of my children have chosen the option of saving a part of their weekly allowance or their monthly allowance into savings account. So when that odd thing does come up, they think really long and hard before asking to have access to. So I store that money for them. That's their sort of longer term savings. And then they sort of send me a message and say, something's come up and I'd like to use. I used to give them a hard time and challenge them. I've stopped doing that. They're adults now. They need to live and die by the consequence of what they're deciding. So, and I think that was the important concept, is give them the space to make the mistakes where the mistakes are not catastrophic. When we are 30, 40 years old and we go and get indebted and we sit with debt hanging over our heads and we can't pay the bond or we can't put food on the table, that's a catastrophic situation. Yeah. When they're young, they can make those mistakes and then they're not so serious. So hopefully they're learning in that instance and saving themselves from really bad consequences when they're older.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jen. I think this is really, like I said, it's not only just for the young people, it's also education for us as parents, already maybe struggling with our own budgeting, practices. Wow. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I think a lot of young people are going to learn a lot. I think it's all about budgeting. It's all about not depriving yourself. It's all about still living, creating a healthy lifestyle for nutrition, creating a healthy social life with your budget. And also, I think we spoke about, really being in a space where we can speak so that it does not affect your mental well-being in the long term. So really, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time in our episode 5, where we discuss the importance of physical activity as a young person. Thank you.